So in the last episode, we got the feed displaying on the page, and off camera I've just done a little bit of work to make this look not quite so hideous, with a few drop shadows and just styling this out a little bit. Today what I want to do is take a look at this publish.date. We're getting this as a string from the API, and what we actually want to do is actually convert this into a Elm date. This means we can then use a package called date format, which I've got a tab open for here, which is a really handy package on the Elm package repository that lets us take a date and actually create a nice format for it. However, to do this, we're going to need to take the string that the API gives us and format that into an Elm date. Luckily, there's a library to do this called Elm ISO 8601 date strings. So this is the date format that our API is returning the dates in. Now it says here this package takes a view that it is a mistake to use these strings as data transfer. Integer milliseconds are a better choice. And I agree with that. However, we're going to kind of deliberately do this. Not everyone is in control of the API they're working with, so I thought it would be handy to show you how I would tackle this problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is need to install this package, so I'm going to just copy the name of it here. And let's go into VS Code. So just popping open a terminal, and I'm just going to paste in this package here, and we'll say yarn elm install. The reason I'm doing yarn elm is because I don't have Elm installed globally. I've got it installed locally into this project. So by putting yarn in front of it, we make sure we run the Elm that's installed locally. And that's going to add, and that then asks me if I want to add these packages. We're going to say yes. There's a couple more packages we need. Elm has a built-in module called time. It's not enabled and installed by default, but you can install it by doing install elm/time. In this case, actually, it's already an indirect dependency. If we make it a direct dependency, that means we can import it. And the reason we're doing that is because the Elm time package has POSIX, which is a way to represent the current time, the current date and time. And if we look at this Elm ISO 8601 date strings function, what it has is it has a function called toTime, which takes a string and returns as a result of either errors, which is this list. Don't worry too much about dead end, that's just a kind of internal detail, or it returns a POSIX value. So that's what we're going to use the time package for. And finally, I'm going to grab this package here, the date format one, copy that, and now in VS Code we'll install that one as well. Great, so those are all done, so now we're ready to start actually working with them. And let me close out that terminal. So where we're actually going to start is we're going to go into feed.elm. This is where we have our decoder, and you can see that it decodes into a feed post. If we pop into types.elm and we search for feed post, we'll find it, where will we find it? Here, right at the bottom, and you can see it's got published at as a string. However, we don't want it to be a string, we want it to be an actual date. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this is maybe a POSIX. The reason it's maybe is because we might get a date that fails to pass correctly. If we do that, then we'll need to maybe show an error, or maybe just not show the published at all. We'll figure that out when we get there. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the publish at type from being a string to being a POSIX, which is a representation, which is how we represent date, time, and Elm. And you see that's not found, it's not imported by default. So I'm just going to import time exposing the POSIX type. So that's better now. So let's go and look into our feed decoder. So in here now we're saying that published at is a string, which is going to fail. So I'm going to change this to decode published at date. In fact, we can just do decode published at. So I'm going to say decode published at is a decoder that can decode something into a POSIX time. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to decode this thing as a string because we want to read the string. Whoops. So the first thing we're going to do is decode this as a string because we want to grab that value and decode it as a string. And we're then going to say d.andThen. So this is JSON decode.andThen. And we're going to get our string date here. And then we're going to try and convert it to a valid date. If it succeeds, that's great. That's the date that we'll return. If it fails, we'll fail at the decoding part. And this is one of the really nice things that Elm makes you do because you have to decode everything, is that I can try and decode the date when we get the data from our API. If it fails, I'll fail by saying that the JSON decoder failed. We won't then end up with an invalid date that happens to show as an error to the user at some point. It will just fail up straight away. This is a much nicer experience than having a random undefined bug later on, all because a date was invalid. So if we go back to the ISO package, you can see it's the toTime function that we care about. So let's import and use this. And you see here the module is called ISO 8601. So at the top, I'll import ISO 8601. So then in here, we're going to say case ISO 8601.toTime on the string date of, if it was an error with any form of error, we're going to say JSON. What we want to do is we want to fail the decoder. So we can call d.succeed to always succeed a decoder with a specific value. We can also do d.fail to make a JSON decoder fail. So we're going to say d.fail invalid date, and then we'll say ++ string date. So we'll log out if it went wrong. Else if it's okay and we got a date, we'll just succeed with that date. So we'll say d.succeed date. Okay, and that seems to have formatted correctly, so at least I haven't made any errors there, but we have a naming error. I cannot find the POSIX type, and that's again because we need to import time exposing POSIX. Okay, let's go down to our decoder, and that all looks good. Let's go and have a look in the browser where we're up to now. And you can see we're now getting an error in the view that the first argument to text is not what I expect, and this is because we're still treating published at here as string, but it's actually now a POSIX time. So let's go into view and let's look for published at, and it's here. And I'm actually going to change this now to a call to view published date, and it will say post.published at. So view published date is going to take a POSIX and return HTML type message. And in here for now, let's just return text not. We're going to need to go up to the top and import time exposing POSIX. We'll go back down into here. Now let's go and have a look at that date format package that we want to use. We now have the date in an actual date format that it can understand, so we can use the library to output nicely formatted dates. So if we look at date format, you can see here we import it and we create a formatter by giving it a time zone, which will just stick to UTC, the actual date, and then it's going to output a string. So I'm actually just going to copy this bit here. So let's just copy the R formatter bit and put this in. We'll put it in above the view published date. We may want to move this out later on, but for now this will do just fine. So we'll change R formatter to published at formatter. And it's not going to take a zone because we will hard code the zone down here to be UTC. So we don't need to do that. And let's just leave it with this date format for now. So the date format library exposes lots of functions to format different bits of our date. We're going to need to import date format. And Elm's time module also exposes that UTC value that we need as well. Okay, so now what we need to do is go down to our view published date. And we actually need to take this date and pass it through our formatter. So we'll take POSIX and pass it through published at formatter. And that's going to return a string, but we need to return HTML, so we're just going to wrap that in text. And now in the browser, you can see that we now have a nicely formatted February 15th, 2018, March 2nd, 2018, and April 18th, 2018. It looks like there's a little bug in the API where these need to be sorted in the reverse order, but I'll fix that on the backend side. But we now have the dates being formatted nicely. Let's say that we wanted to put something else in here, like the day of the week. Let's have a look at the Elm package docs for date format and see if we can figure out how that would work. So if we look at date format, let's go into date format here, the main module. So we have format, which is what we're using here. And then we need So the date format module has a format function which takes a list of tokens and the zone and the date. And the list of tokens is all the different ways we can format the date. And here they are: month number, month suffix, month fixed. So let's look for, we've got day of the month, day of the year, day of the week, 0, day of the week abbreviated, day of the week name full. So let's use day of the week name full, and I'll just copy this function name here. So in here you can see we have month name full, let's put in here date format.day of week full. Let's see what that looks like in the browser. It's there, but it looks like we need a bit of a gap. We need to put a gap. So it's there and working well, but we need to put a gap between the day of the week and the month. And it looks like we can use dateformat.text to do just this. So we'll say dateformat.text, comma, space. So we have Thursday, February 15th, 2018. In fact, let's remove that comma. I don't think we need the comma between the 15th and 2018. But we do need... So let's remove that comma, but we still want something, so I'll just leave a space in there. And there we have it. So that's a really good way where if an API is giving you some string data, but you know there's an actual better type and a way you can represent it, the decoder.andThen function is a really nice way of doing that. So if there's ever a custom data format you need, decoding it and converting that decoded string value at the time where you're doing the JSON decoding is a really nice way to go about making sure that once your data has been passed, you know that the values are correct. So here we know once this decoder has run and it's not failed, we know that every published value that we have in the rest of our application is going to be an actual date, not the string. And we know that if it failed, it will have failed at the JSON decoding stage. So decode.andThen that lets you take a result of one decoder and do some more work on it is a really nice way to ensure that you can take string data from APIs and convert them into more accurate data types in the front end.